The house key weighed heavy in my pocket as I navigated the Westbrook Hotel's crowded parking lot. 6 months of searching countless rejected offers, and mountains of paperwork had finally paid off. We had our first home. Not the Victorian dream house. Sarah had initially wanted but a solid 3-bedroom in a good school district. A practical choice I'd convinced her to make. Inside the ballroom, crystal chandeliers cast flattering light over people in expensive clothes. Holding champagne flutes, I felt out of place in my department store suit. Scanning the room for Sarah, I spotted her near a massive floral arrangement, her auburn hair swept up elegantly, wearing a black dress I'd never seen before. She was deep in conversation with Gregory Walsh, himself distinguished, confident with a smile that never quite reached his eyes. He stood too close to her, one hand casually resting on her bare shoulder. As I approached, I caught fragments of their conversation. "The London trip next month," he was saying quietly. We should extend it a few days. The client meeting will wrap on Thursday, but I've booked us until Sunday." Sarah glanced up at him. "That's awfully presumptuous, Mr. Walsh." "Greg," he corrected his thumb, tracing small circles on her skin. "And after Milan, I think we're well beyond formalities." Milan, Sarah had told me her Milan trip was a women's leadership conference. I'd picked her up at the airport afterward, noticing her relaxed demeanor and subtle tan that hadn't been there before. "Hey," I said, forcing a smile as I stepped into their circle. "Sorry I'm late." Sarah startled visibly, her champagne sloshing dangerously close to the rim. For a split second, her expression wasn't pleasant surprise. It was alarm quickly masked. "Mark," she said, her voice higher than normal. "I didn't think you were coming. I'd told you this morning I'd be here," I replied, confusion creeping in. "Just that the closing might make me late." Greg's hand slid from Sarah's shoulder, but not before giving it a slight squeeze. He extended the same hand to me, his grip firm to the point of discomfort. "The teacher," he said with an inflection that made my profession sound like a charming hobby. "Sarah mentioned you might join us." "Might," I echoed, looking at Sarah. "I meant you were unsure about timing," she clarified quickly. "With the house thing, I repeated flatly. "You mean the purchase of our first home?" "That house thing." Greg's eyebrows rose fractionally at my tone. "Well, congratulations are in order. Then, first home. Big step." He raised his glass. "To new beginnings." Sarah's smile didn't reach her eyes as she clinked her glass against his new beginnings. She echoed, not meeting my gaze. A woman in a designer gown approached, touching Greg's elbow. "The Andersons are looking for you." "Something about Singapore duty calls," he said smoothly. "Sarah, don't forget, we need to finalize those projections before midnight." He gave her a significant low. Okay, that implied projections meant something entirely different. "Mark, enjoy the party." He disappeared into the crowd, leaving an uncomfortable silence. "You look nice," I offered. "New dress?" Sarah nodded, still scanning the room. "Picked it up last week. Work has been crazy." "You've barely been home," I agreed, keeping my voice neutral. "But I have good news that couldn't wait. The house is officially ours." I reached for her hand. "We close escrow next week." For a moment, genuine excitement flashed across her face. Really, everything went through. "What about the roof issues all negotiated?" I smiled, relieved at this glimpse of the old Sarah. "The seller's covering repairs, and we got them to throw in the washer and dryer." "That's amazing." For that brief moment, we were us again. But then her phone buzzed, and as she glanced at the screen, her expression shifted. "I need to circulate," she said, already pulling away. "The Johnsons are potential clients, and Greg wants me to." "Greg again," I cut in. "What happened to Mr. Walsh? Seems like you two have gotten pretty chummy." Her eyes narrowed. "He's my boss." "Mark, being chummy is part of getting ahead. You know how important this promotion is to me?" "To us," I corrected. "It was supposed to be important to us for our future." Sarah's expression softened marginally. "And it is. Just let me handle the work. Politics, okay? We'll celebrate properly tomorrow, I promise." Before I could respond, she'd as gone weaving through the crowd toward a distinguished-looking couple near the bar. Another Malin, I looked up to find the bartender watching me with practiced neutrality. I'd been nursing the same scotch for nearly an hour, watching Sarah work the room while steadfastly avoiding my vicinity. Why not? I pushed my glass forward, make it a double. As he poured, a statuesque blonde in a red dress settled onto the bar stool beside me. "You must be Sarah's fiancée," she said without preamble. I turned surprised. "And you are?" "Melissa Walsh," she extended a manicured hand. "Greg's soon-to-be ex-wife." I nearly choked on my scotch. "Nice to meet you." A sardonic smile played at her lips as she signaled the bartender, "Vodka martini extra dirty." She turned back to me. "You look shocked." "Don't be. Everyone knows. Greg and I are divorcing everyone except you, apparently." I studied her more carefully. Designer dress, flawless makeup, diamond studs that could probably pay off my student loans. But there was exhaustion around her eyes, a brittleness to her smile. "I'm sorry about your marriage," and I offered. She laughed without humor. "Don't be 15 years was enough. The last 3 were just negotiations." She accepted her martini. "So how's the blissful engagement?" The question felt like a trap. "Fine," I said cautiously. "We just bought a house." "Actually, congratulations." Her gaze drifted to where Sarah now stood with Greg. "Word of advice. Check the deed before you sign anything. Make sure it's in both names." Something cold settled in my stomach. What dough? Does that mean Melissa's eyes returned to mine, assessing, "You really don't know, do you?" Before I could press further, a commotion near the entrance drew attention. A man in a rumpled suit was arguing with security, his voice carrying across the suddenly quiet room. "I have every right to be here. I'm a Meridian investor." I recognized him from the company's annual report. Daniel Foster, a major shareholder known for his combative stance on Meridian's expansion. Greg smoothly detached himself from his group and approached. "Dan, this isn't the forum for..." "Don't D me." Walsh Foster spat. "The SEC filing disappeared. Convenient timing, wouldn't you say, right before the quarterly review?" The room went silent, everyone watching with avid interest. "You're drunk, Dan," Greg said evenly. "Let security take you home, and we can discuss this on Monday. Discuss how you cook the books on Peterson, how you've been falsifying reports." Foster's voice rose, "Or how you've been sleeping with half the executive team to keep them quiet." Several gasps rippled through the crowd. My eyes automatically sought Sarah Husto. Odd frozen, her face drained of color. "That's enough," Greg snapped, nodding to security. "Remove him." 2 men in dark suits flanked Foster, guiding him toward the exit. "This isn't over, Walsh," he called. "The board will hear about this." As he disappeared, the room erupted in nervous chatter. Greg raised his hands, his composure impeccable. "My apologies for the interruption. Dan's been under tremendous pressure lately. Now let's get back to celebrating another record quarter." For Meridian, applause followed, and the band quickly resumed playing. Beside me, Melissa drained her martini. "And that," she said quietly, "is why I'm taking him for every penny in the divorce." I barely heard her too, focused on Sarah's reaction. She wasn't joining the resume conversations. Instead, she was typing furiously on her phone, her expression tense. Greg caught her eye across the room and made a subtle gesture toward a side door. She nodded almost imperceptibly before slipping away. "Excuse me," I muttered to Melissa. Sliding off the bar stool, I followed Sarah's path, keeping a discreet distance. The side door led to a hallway of meeting rooms. At the far end, light spilled from a partially open door. As I approached, I heard voices, Greg's low and insistent, Sarah's higher with tension. "Can't just ignore this, Greg. If Foster takes this to the board, Foster's a drunk with a grudge. No one will believe him, but the SEC filing is handled. Trust me." A pause. "You do trust me, don't you?" "Sarah," I reached the door and peered through the crack. They stood close together in a small conference room, Greg's hand cupped Sarah's cheek, his thumb brushing across her lower lip. "Of course I trust you," she said softer now. "But this is my career too. If there's even a hint of impropriety with the Peterson numbers..." "There isn't," he cut her off. "You signed off on those reports because they were accurate. Remember that if anyone asked..." His tone left no room for debate. "Now we should get back before people notice we're gone." "Too late," I said, pushing the door open fully. They sprang apart. Sarah's eyes widened in alarm, while Greg's narrowed in calculation. "Mark," she stammered. "This isn't what it looks like." I finished, my voice steady, despite the fury building inside. "Funny, that's exactly what it looks like. My fiancée having a secret meeting with her boss, who just happens to be getting divorced." Greg straightened his tie, unfazed. "Your fiancée is discussing sensitive company business with her superior. Perhaps you should consider the damage your unfounded accusations could do to her career." "Greg, please," Sarah interjected. "Let me handle this." "Handle me?" I laughed coldly. Like I'm a problem to be managed. That's not what I meant. "I met Melissa, by the way." I continued, watching Sarah's face carefully. "Interesting woman, seems to know a lot about what's going on at Meridian. And between you two..." Sarah paused visibly. "Mark, please, let's go somewhere. Private and talk. Private like this little rendezvous." I gestured around. "Or private. Like your trip to Milan. That wasn't actually a women's leadership conference." Greg stepped forward, his patience visibly wearing thin. "I think you should listen to Sarah and continue this domestic dispute elsewhere. Just tell me the truth," I said to Sarah, ignoring him completely. "Are you sleeping with him?" The question hung in the air. Sarah's eyes filled with tears, but she remained silent, which was answer enough. How long my voice remained, steady, controlled. "Mark, please." How long she swallowed hard. 3 months. 3 months. While we were house hunting, while we were planning our future. Is that why our wedding keeps getting postponed? Because you're too busy screwing your way up the corporate ladder. The slap caught me by surprise. The sharp crack echoing in the small room. Sarah stood before me. Hands still raised, eyes wide, as if she couldn't believe what she'd done. "You don't get to talk to me like that," she whispered. I touched my cheek, feeling the sting. "And you don't get to pretend I don't exist when it's convenient. Then act outraged when I call you on it." Greg stepped between us. "This has gone far enough, Mark. Leave now, or I'll have security escort you out." I reached into my pocket and pulled out the house key. I signed the final papers today. Our dream house. Our future. I set the key on the conference table with a small, definitive click. "It's all yours now. Enjoy it with your boss, Sarah." His face crumpled. "Mark, wait." But I was already walking away out the door, down the hallway, back through the party, where music played and people laughed as if my world hadn't just imploded. As I reached the exit, a hand caught my arm. I turned to find Melissa Walsh, her expression surprisingly gentle. "If you're leaving, take this." She pressed a business card into my hand. "My lawyer, you're going to need one." I stared at the card, then back at her. "Why are you helping me?" She smiled, sad but genuine. "Let's just say, I'm not a fan of history repeating itself." With that, she disappeared back into the party. I pocketed the card and stepped outside, the cool air, a shock against my flushed skin. As I drove away from the Westbrook, I didn't look in the rearview mirror. There was nothing behind me worth seeing anymore. The next week, I stayed at my friend Jason's apartment and contacted a lawyer, a college friend who specialized in real estate. Since both our names were on the mortgage, but only I had signed the final paperwork. We were in legal limbo. Either Sarah would need to qualify for the loan on her own, or we'd have to sell before even moving in. Sarah called and texted constantly, her messages evolving from defensive to pleading. I blocked her number after the third day. When she cornered me outside the school where I taught, I was prepared with a proposition. 2 minutes, I said, not inviting her into my classroom. "That's all you get." She looked terrible. Beautiful still, but with dark circles under her eyes and a pore that suggested she hadn't been sleeping. "Good, I've been trying to reach you for days." She began, her voice trembling. "What happened at the party is over and done." I cut her off. "Here's what's going to happen with the house. You either buy out my portion of the down payment by Friday, or we put it back on the market. Your choice." She blinked clearly, not expecting this business-like approach. "Mark, I don't want to talk about the house. I want to talk about us." "There is no us anymore," I said flatly, checking my watch. "Yo, you made that clear when you chose your career and your boss over our relationship." "It wasn't like that," she protested Greg and I. "It was a mistake, a stupid work stress thing that got out of hand for 3 months." I raised an eyebrow. "That's quite a hand job." She flinched. "I deserve that." "But Mark, what we had 4 years together, that's worth fighting for." "Isn't it?" "What we had died the moment you decided I wasn't worth acknowledging at that party." I said firmly. "Your 2 minutes are up. Let me know about the house by Friday, Mark, please." She caught the door before I could close it. "I love you. Despite everything, I still love you." "No, you don't," I said with certainty. "You love the idea of me, the safe backup plan, while you played corporate games with Walsh, but I'm not that guy anymore. Goodbye, Sarah." I closed the door firmly and turned back to preparing for my next class. That evening, Sarah emailed to say she'd buy out my portion of the down payment. 3 days later, I signed over my rights to the property collected at Kashi. Heirs check and walked away from our dream house without ever having lived in it. I used part of the money to rent a decent one-bedroom apartment across town and put the rest in savings. New Beginning Fund, I labeled it in my banking app. Moving out of our shared apartment took less than 3 hours, 4 years together, and I could fit my personal belongings into 10 boxes and 3 pieces of furniture. Sarah arranged to be at work when I came for my things. Leaving a letter on the kitchen counter that I didn't bother to read, I left the engagement ring in its place. A 9,000 diamond that had taken 6 months of overtime to afford clean break. Jason advised as he helped load the last box. "Best way to handle these things." "Already done," I assured him. The moment I'd seen Sarah with her boss, something had switched off inside me. There was no going back, no second guessing, just forward movement. 3 weeks after the party. My phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. "Is this Mark Donovan?" "Yes." "Who's this? Vivian Hart, FBI, I'm in. Investigating financial irregularities at Meridian Financial, and would like to ask you a few questions." My stomach dropped. "I don't work for Meridian." "No, but your fiancé does. Or rather did." "Did? What do you mean?" "Did M. Collins resign from Meridian last week? I assumed you were aware." "We're no longer together," I said simply. "I haven't spoken to her recently." I see another pause. "Mr. Donovan, what I'm about to tell you is sensitive. There's an active federal investigation into Meridian Financial, specifically regarding the Peterson acquisition. Several executives, including Gregory Walsh, are under scrutiny for securities fraud, falsifying financial statements, and wire fraud. And Sarah, is she under investigation too? That's part of why I'm calling you. Ms. Collins has agreed to cooperate with our investigation in exchange for immunity. She's provided valuable information about the inner workings of the fraud scheme." I laughed without humor. "Let me guess. She's claiming she knew nothing about it until recently, Agent." Hart's voice remained neutral. "I can't discuss the details of her testimony. However, we believe you might have information relevant to our case. Were you present at the Meridian corporate event at the Westbrook Hotel 3 weeks ago?" "Yes." "Did you witness an altercation involving Daniel Foster?" I recounted what I'd seen and heard, including Foster's accusations about cooked books. "And did Miss Collins ever discuss the Peterson acquisition with you?" "Not in detail," I admitted. "She mentioned working long hours on it, but nothing specific about the financials." "What about Gregory Walsh? Did she discuss her relationship with him?" "If you're asking if I knew they were sleeping together, the answer is no." Not until that night, Agent Hart was silent for a moment. "Mr. Donovan, would you be willing to provide a formal statement? It could be instrumental in our case against Walsh." I hesitated. Part of me wanted nothing more than to see Greg Walsh get what he deserved. But another part wanted to put the whole Meridian mess firmal. In my past, I'll do it, I decided. "When do you need me?" After arranging a meeting with Agent Hart. I had barely hung up when my doorbell rang. When I opened it, Melissa Walsh was standing there. "How did you find me?" I asked, too surprised for pleasantries. "I'm resourceful," she replied with a thin smile. "May I come in?" Reluctantly, I stepped aside. She surveyed my sparse apartment without comment, settling onto my second-hand couch. "Why are you here, Mrs. Walsh?" "Melissa, please. And I'm here because my soon-to-be ex-husband is about to be indicted for securities fraud. And I thought you might like to know that your ex-fiancée is throwing him under the bus to save herself." I crossed my arms. "The FBI already called me. What do you know that they don't?" "Greg called me in a rage last night, demanding I lean on my father, who sits on Meridian's board, to intervene." She rolled her eyes, as if I would help him after what he did to me, which was the same thing he did to his first wife with me, and the same thing he was preparing to do to Sarah with his new executive assistant. She smiled grimly at my expression. "Yes, your precious Sarah was just the latest in a long line. Greg has a pattern. Seduce ambitious women, use them to facilitate his schemes, then discard them when they become liabilities." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I'm curious about what you're going to tell the FBI." She leaned forward. "Are you going to help Sarah paint herself as an innocent victim, manipulated by big bad Greg? Or are you going to tell them what you saw at that party, that she was a willing participant in both the affair and whatever financial shenanigans they were discussing?" "I plan to tell the truth," I said firmly. "Whatever that cost, Sarah or Greg." "Good." She reached into her purse and extracted a manila envelope. "These might help emails. Between Greg and Sarah going back 6 months, my lawyer obtained them during discovery for my divorce." I hesitated. "What's in them?" "Business communications about Peterson. Read them and then decide what to tell the FBI about your ex-fiancé's level of involvement." She placed the envelope on my coffee table, rose gracefully, and moved toward the door. "One more thing," she added, turning back. "Sarah knew about us, about me. Greg never hid that he was married. Whatever story she's the..." Ling herself, or you remember that. After she left, I opened the envelope and began reading. The emails painted a damning picture of Sarah's involvement in the Peterson deal. She hadn't just known about the falsified numbers, she'd helped create them, suggesting ways to adjust projections to make the acquisition more attractive to investors. Worse, there were references to their relationship that made it clear it had started well before the 3 months she'd admitted to. In one exchange, from 5 months ago, she'd written, "Milan was perfect. Can't wait for our next conference." 5 months. While I was planning our wedding, while I was looking at houses, when Agent Hart called again the next day, I told her everything. What I'd seen at the party, what Sarah had admitted to me, and what I'd learned from Melissa. I didn't mention the emails, specifically not wanting to implicate Melissa, but I made it clear that Sarah had been a knowing participant in both the fraud and the affair. "Thank you for your candor," Mr. Donovan, Agent Hart said. "This will be helpful 6 months after the party." My life had settled into a new normal. I'd moved to a better apartment, started a master's program in educational leadership, and even gone on a few dates. Nothing serious, but steps toward whatever came next. The federal investigation into Meridian had resulted in indictments for Gregory Walsh and 2 other executives, with trials scheduled for the following year. Sarah had disappeared from my life completely. According to Jason, who'd heard it from a mutual friend, she'd moved back to her hometown in Ohio. The house we'd almost shared had been sold in a short sale. Another casualty of the Meridian fallout, I was grading papers one evening when my phone rang. An Ohio area code. I almost let it go to voicemail. Almost hello, Mark. It's Sarah. Her voice sent a jolt through me. Familiar, yet strange. Like a song I'd once known by heart, but hadn't heard in years. What do you want? I asked, my tone neutral. I'm in town for the depositions, she said. I know I'm the last person you want to hear from, but I need to talk to you just 15 minutes. My instinct was to hang up, but something curiosity perhaps made me agree to meet her at a coffee shop near campus-neutral territory with plenty of witnesses. She was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table with 2 cups. She'd lost weight, and her once stylish hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. No makeup, no power suit, just jeans and a sweater. I ordered your usual, she said as I sat down. Black coffee, 1 sugar. I nodded but didn't touch the cup. You said you needed to talk. She took a deep breath. I'm testifying against Greg next month. The prosecutor says my testimony will be crucial in the case. Congratulations on your immunity deal, I said without inflection. She flinched. I deserve that. But Mark, there's something you should know. The FBI has the emails between Greg and me. I'm aware Agent Hart mentioned them. Then, you know I was involved from the beginning, that I helped falsify the Peterson numbers. She stared down at her untouched latte. What you don't know is why. Does it matter? My voice remained level. The why doesn't change what happened. It matters to me. She insisted, finally meeting my eyes. When Greg took over the department, he made it clear that my future at Meridian depended on being a team player. The Peterson acquisition was his baby. When the initial projections didn't support the deal, he asked me to revise them, and you agreed. I tried to push back. But then he started talking about restructuring, about my position being redundant. Her hands clenched around her cup. I'd worked so hard to get where I was. The thought of losing it all. So you fudged the numbers, I stated flatly, to save your job? Yes. She looked genuinely ashamed. It started small, just tweaking projections within a reasonable margin. But once Peterson was in motion, the adjustments got bigger. When I tried to raise concerns, Greg reminded me that my signature was on the documents, that I was complicit. And that's when the affair started, when he had leverage over you. She closed her eyes briefly. It's not an excuse, but yes, that's when the dynamic shifted. He made it clear that my cooperation in every sense was expected. You seem pretty happy with the arrangement at the Westbrook. I observed coolly, not exactly acting under duress. By then, I'd convinced myself. It was consensual, that I was making a calculated choice. Her voice cracked slightly. It's amazing what you can justify when the alternative is admitting you're being used. I leaned back, studying her. What do you want from me, Sarah? Absolution. I'm not a priest. Nothing, she said quickly. I wanted you to know the truth. The truth, I repeated. Like how you told me the affair had been going on for 3 months. When the emails show it was at least 5, her face palled. You've seen the emails. Melissa Walsh was kind enough to share them. God, Sarah whispered, looking stricken. Don't bother with more lies. I cut her off. You made your choices, Sarah. So did I. I've moved on. I know, she said, her eyes filling with tears, and I'll regret what I did for the rest of my life. I stood up, leaving my untouched coffee. I need to go. I have papers to grade. Mark, she called as I turned to leave. Were you ever going to look for me? After you left that night, try to work things out. I paused, considering the question. No, I said finally, with absolute certainty. The moment I saw you with him, I knew exactly who you were, and that wasn't someone I wanted to spend my life with. As I walked out of the coffee shop, I felt a weight lifting. The last remaining threads of what-ifs and might have been finally severed. 1 year to the day after the Westbrook Hotel party, I found myself at another corporate function. This time I was accompanying Emma, a fellow teacher who'd become a good friend over the past months. Her husband worked for a publishing company and had been called away on a family emergency the day of their annual gala. "You're saving my life," she'd insisted when she asked me to be her +1 Jonathan already RSVP'd, and I can't face his boss alone. Happy to help, I told her, and I meant it. Emma and I had bonded over shared academic interests, gradually extending our friendship beyond school hours. She'd been divorced for 3 years and understood the process of rebuilding a life after a relationship implosion. The venue was nothing like the Westbrook, just a rented event space with simple decorations and a buffet table. As Emma introduced me around, I was struck by how different it felt from a year ago. These people asked about my teaching, showed genuine interest in my gradua. The studies treated me as someone worth knowing rather than an inconvenient appendage. "You clean up nice, Professor," Emma teased as we found our table. "The tie brings out your eyes." I smiled, feeling oddly comfortable in a situation that would have been anxiety-inducing a year ago. "You're not so bad yourself." Emma looked lovely in a simple green dress that complemented her auburn hair. At 42, she had laugh lines around her eyes and a confidence that came from surviving life's curveballs. We'd been dancing around the edges of something more than friendship for weeks, neither of us quite ready to name it. "Penny for your thoughts," she said, noticing my momentary distraction. "Just reflecting," I admitted. "Today's an anniversary of sorts, good or bad at the time, but in retrospect necessary." I hesitated, then added, "The party where I discovered my fiancée was cheating on me with her boss was exactly a year ago." Emma's eyes widened. "That's quite an anniversary. Should we be drinking to good riddance or drowning sorrows?" "Neither," I decided. "Let's drink to unexpected new paths." She clinked her glass against mine. "I can definitely toast to that later," as people began dancing to the live band. Emma turned to me with an arched eyebrow. "So, Professor Donovan, do they teach dancing in history, graduate programs these days?" "They might have mentioned it in historiographical methods," I replied, standing and offering my hand. "Care to find out?" We moved to the dance floor, falling into an easy rhythm together. As I twirled her under my arm, I caught sight of my reflection in a decorative mirror, smiling, relaxed, looking like a man who had found his feet again. "You know," Emma said as we swayed to a slower song, "when we first started having lunch together, I thought you were the saddest person I'd ever met." "Ouch," I laughed. "That bad?" "Not bad," she clarified, her hand warm against my shoulder, "just wounded, like you were carrying something heavy that you couldn't put down." I considered this. "And now you look like someone who's figured out that it's okay to set down burdens that aren't yours to carry." She studied my face. "It's a good look on you." The song ended and we returned to our table, conversation flowing easily between us. Emma told me about her daughter's college applications, and I shared stories from my graduate seminars. It felt natural, unforced, a connection based on who we were now, not who we'd been with other people. As the evening wound down, we stepped outside into the cool night air. Emma shivered slightly, and I offered her my jacket. "Thank you for coming with me tonight," she said. "It would have been boring alone." "Thank you for inviting me," I replied. It was healing in a way I didn't expect. She looked at me curiously. Because of Sarah, I considered the question carefully. Partly, but more, because I realized something tonight. "What's that I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be?" Emma's smile in that moment was worth every painful step of the journey that had led me there. Not because she was a replacement for what I had lost, but because she represented a future I couldn't have imagined a year ago, one that belonged entirely to me. "Want to get breakfast tomorrow?" she asked as we walked to our cars. "There's this place near the farmer's market that makes incredible waffles." "I'd like that," I said, realizing I meant it completely. As I drove home later, I thought about all that had happened in the years since Sarah had acted like I didn't exist at her boss's party. The pain, the anger, the rebuilding, the federal investigation that was still ongoing. The life I thought I wanted versus the one I was actually creating. I didn't regret leaving that night, walking away from a relationship built on lie. I didn't regret any of the steps that had led me here. To graduate school, to new friendships, to breakfast plans, with a woman who saw me clearly and liked what she saw. Sarah had made her choices, and I had made mine. The past, with all its broken promises and betrayals, had finally settled into its proper place. Behind me, informing but not defining the man I had become. The man who had left and never looked back, and found something better waiting ahead. Music,